All right, time for some Major League Soccer. As always, we bring it to you in the form of the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good, an MVP frontrunner showdown on Saturday in Austin as Austin FC's Sebastian Driussi and Nashville's Hany Mukhtar went toe-to-toe. Mukhtar scored first via penalty, his 23rd goal of the season. 5 minutes later, Driussi leveled the match at 1-1, his 21st goal of the season. The game finished in a 1-1 draw between these two top four teams in the Western Conference. Herc, just a few games left, so who are you giving the MLS MVP nod to between Driussi and Mukhtar, or are you going with someone off the board?
This is a tough one, right? Because if you look what Sebastian Driussi has done with this team right now in Austin, it is crazy. The turnaround is insane. I believe they were like second to last in the West last year to now, I mean, pretty much chasing LAFC for that final or a top spot in the West. It's a crazy turnaround. But I think about Sebastian Driussi and where Austin would be with them. They would probably still be a very good team, especially playing in that place. But this Nashville team, without, 23 goals, 11 assists of Hany Mukhtar, where would they be? Their second leading goal scorer has like 5 goals. He is the offense for Nashville. He is the complete package for Nashville, which is an insane amount of business when you think about it, crazy amount of business, where they purchased him from like $3 million from Brony, from Denmark. And he comes in, and look at these numbers. In about 2.5 years, 77 games, 43 goals, 27 assists. He's not only MVP for this year, he's one of the best pieces of business, one of the most important transfers or best transfers in Major League Soccer history. It's not only this year, but he's clearly, in my eyes, the front runner for Major League Soccer's MVP. He's got 14 goals in the last 15 appearances. It's something crazy for Nashville. He's my front runner.
Yeah, if you go off stats, I think you got to give it to Mukhtar, right? He's got 34 goal involvements compared to just 28 for Driussi. But if you go beyond the stats, I might go with Driussi, and this is the argument that I would make. One, Austin's a better team. I think Driussi gets a lot of credit for that as their best player. Austin's a much better team right now than Nashville in terms of the Western Conference table. I think the other thing that's important to note here is Austin is 2 years into their build. Nashville is 3 years into their build. So Nashville, in theory, has had another year to put a team around a guy like Hany Mukhtar.
2020 build, remember that.
Okay, sure, you want to put an asterisk in there. That's fine. Your expansion year was 2020. Obviously difficult to build a team. But still, I think Nashville had much higher expectations than Austin. For me, anyway, coming into this season. Austin was 12th in the Western Conference last year. The one thing I'll agree with you on here is kind of what you talked about with the profile of the signings. These are two very interesting profile players. They both spent time in Europe. Obviously, Mukhtar started in Europe. Driussi went to Europe. And then come to Major League Soccer. I mean, Driussi's 26, Mukhtar's 27, so right in their mid-20s. It's a far cry, Herc, from, say, 6 years ago, when David Villa was winning MVP. Like, it's a totally different profile.
For sure.
It says a lot about what MLS is looking for as they go out and make these signings.
Absolutely, and they're knocking it out the park. When you think they spent $3 million, it's just good scouting. It's good. It's a good investment right there. It's a great return, and it's a player you could build a franchise around for years to come.
Hany Mukhtar, Sebastian Driussi, no doubt two of the good in Major League Soccer. What about the bad, Herc? What about the bad? We had 3 teams eliminated from playoff contention this past weekend. Sporting Kansas City, Chicago, and Toronto FC. TFC eliminated after a 4-0 defeat to Orlando on Saturday. Also eliminated after a huge summer transfer window that saw them bring in, among others, Italian internationals Lorenzo Insigne and Federico Bernardeschi. Herc, no playoffs for Toronto FC in Bob Bradley's first season. Do we consider it a failure in Toronto?
No, I'm not ready to consider it a failure in Toronto because you knew that it was going to be up to the second half of the season. The Italians, the reinforcements were going to come late. And listen, it's 4 losses in the final 9 games, that final stretch, right? But if you look at it, it was only 1 loss in 6, and then it just went off the rails, starting with Montreal and the other 3 in a row. So this is a team that was banking on the second half. It just was too little too late. But if you looked at reinforcements, Bernardeschi, in 11 games, he ended up scoring something like 8 goals, 4 assists. Insigne, 6 goals. I mean, he was 1 goal behind Jimenez and Osorio, who were the team leaders in that category. Mark Anthony Kaye gets injured. Richie Laryea comes back. It was just too little too late. But this is a team that I think is going to be turning some heads next season. This is a team that can get better defensively and is going to be a contender in the East, but it was just asking way too much of them to bank on the second half, or the final stretch, if you will, of the season.
I'm glad you mentioned Marc-Anthony Kaye and Richie Laryea, right? Because it wasn't just the two Italians that came in. There's a lot of changes, a lot of upheaval that this Toronto FC team has gone through over the course of this season. I don't know if it reminded you at all of the end of the regular season last year with LAFC. Remember, they needed some points at the end and end up shipping 5. I think it was against Colorado to get eliminated from postseason contention. And it kind of happened here, although it didn't just happen against Orlando. It was, as you say, the last few games. They've shipped 4 goals in each of their last 3 games, which were effectively, as we see now, they're eliminated, must-wins for postseason contention. That's not something that I think Bob Bradley's going to feel very good about, that this team was that loose in these big games down the stretch. That cannot sit well with a coach like Bradley.
No, absolutely not. But if you look at one of them, it was against their rivals, against Montreal, a game that, mind you, you were winning. And to have it turned around in your home field in front of your fans, it's not a good feeling. And then Atlanta, a team that you think on paper you definitely have a good chance against, puts 4 against you. And then Orlando is a team that's very difficult, Open Cup champions and whatnot, but you certainly do not expect in 3 games to give up 12 goals.
Right. Real quick here, because obviously you're right off this season, the guys come in late. Next season, playoffs are bust for Bradley and TFC,
Absolutely.
Right? No excuses.
You could put an asterisk on this season if you want, but there's really no excuse this season. I just wouldn't consider it a failure.
All right. Let's get to the ugly then. It features my beloved DC United, not for their latest defeat, unfortunately. They lost 3-2 to Inter Miami over the weekend. The result, not the focus here. Instead, it's the incident between Damion Lowe and Taxi Fountas, in which Fountas is alleged to have racially abused the Jamaican international. Fountas subbed out of the match shortly after the incident, and on TV you could see both managers as well as some Inter Miami players coming together to discuss what had occurred. For more, let's hear from someone who was there. Phil Neville, the Inter Miami manager, had this to say after the match.
I think there's no place at all for racism on a football field, in society. I've just been speaking to the owners, all 3 owners, and they 100% agree that there's no way in the world that any form of racism should be happening on a football field. And I must commend my players for keeping their calm. I must commend the referee for a really, really, really difficult situation. He followed the protocol set out by the MLS. And I must give massive respect to Wayne Rooney for dealing with it in the way that he did.
Those are the words of Phil Neville. How about this from DeAndre Yedlin via Pablo Maurer at MLSist on Twitter. Yedlin saying Damion and another player got into a scuffle. As Damion walks away, one of their guys call him the N-word. Pretty clear what DeAndre Yedlin heard. As for Taxi Fountas, he gave a statement on social media effectively denying, and not just denying, I think you can say vehemently denying the allegations there, says he is falsely accused. All right, Herc, it's another sad chapter where we see soccer and racism coming together. What's your reaction from what we saw in this game between DC United and Inter Miami?
It's sad on so many levels, especially this weekend. Racism's always sad. Alleged racism, I should say. We should do due process here with Taxi Fountas and let the information come to light. But it's disappointing because in a weekend where at least the world's attention was on Vinicius Jr., if he scores, will he dance? And the underlying racism in La Liga and in Spain and how that was coming to a head. This happens in your bubble, our bubble here, on our neck of the woods, our sector, to remind you that this is still very prevalent in the world. It's sad because you never want to see this happen, but it's also a reminder that things haven't changed. Not too long ago, it was a Diamante, LAFC forward who accused a Portland Timbers player of racism. What came about that? An investigation and nothing else. And then it was a Portland Timbers player, Diego Chara, who accused Fragapan of Minnesota of the exact same thing. And what came about that? It was an investigation and nothing else. So here we are again. Another investigation. And now you have players that a lot of people would vouch for. Andre Yedlin, a U.S. men's national team veteran, saying he heard something, saying it's now up to the league, and how they will respond will be very telling. Here we are again, another investigation. What will come upon this? Because we keep hearing from the league, zero tolerance when it comes to this type of an event. Well, this is now the third time that I can recall in the last few seasons where there's been this type of event. Will it just get swept under the rug? Will there be nothing was found type of notification or press release? Something needs to come of this, because it can't just be zero tolerance until people stop paying attention.
So you mentioned, Herc, the MLS investigations, and specifically the case with Diego Chara and Fragapane of Minnesota United last year. MLS did an investigation, and in that investigation, they couldn't corroborate what was allegedly said. So that's why you get no suspension, you get no punishment. Here, at least based on what we heard from Phil Neville and DeAndre Yedlin, just those two guys alone, and I think it's also important to point out what we're not hearing from DC United. If you saw the post-game reaction from Wayne Rooney, it was like, there will be an investigation. I can't say anything more. We've not heard any DC United players coming out to defend Taxi. We've not heard the club really do anything other than a few hours ago releasing a 2-sentence statement where they say they'll cooperate with the league. I don't think this is going to end very well for Taxi Fountas. Of course, there needs to be an investigation. But Herc, if all they're looking to do in those investigations is corroborate what was said, it's pretty clear there are at least two people already willing to corroborate it. I think there's a big suspension coming. The other thing that I took out of this was how it was handled in game. It wasn't the referees, right? Ismail Elfath is the center ref in this game. He says neither he or anybody else on his team heard anything. It's not like a league official that stops the game and makes sure Fountas is subbed off. It was self-policed here. It was the Inter Miami players, as you mentioned, DeAndre Yedlin stepping up, and it was clearly Phil Neville and Wayne Rooney coming to some understanding. The players were the ones, Herc, that took care of this in live time, in real time.
I mean, I congratulate the players, but it's sad that the players have to police themselves in these type of aspects. And I'm not saying the referees have to be on top of everything. They have to hear everything on the field. They're going to miss things like this. But if it's really zero tolerance and you already have multiple people claiming they heard this racial slur, well, we need to see it because everybody is watching. What the league does now will set precedent.
Yep. So I'm sure we will be hearing more from Major League Soccer on this story involving DC United and Inter Miami.
Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week. Subscribe to ESPN+.